I'm Stephen Scheuer, welcoming you to another in our series of oral histories in which we are fortunate indeed to be able to interview those persons who have helped shape the style and substance of television and our major media today. With us today is Albert Maysles, who's been a leading force in nonfiction filmmaking for over 4 decades. With his brother David, he pioneered the direct cinema style of documentary films. Films described as those in which we see the drama of life unfolding before us without scripts, without sets, without narration, but certainly with integrity, with great storytelling, and with artistic rendering. Among his many well-deserved honors, he's been named a Guggenheim Fellow and saluted as one of the 100 world's finest cinematographers by Eastman Kodak. With me to interview our award-winning guest is Morton Silverstein, the producer of this series. It's our pleasure to welcome back, once again, my old young friend, Albert Maysles. Al,
Thank you.
We're delighted to have you with us. We're speaking now on October 24th in New York City, 7 weeks after the horrible terrorist attack. And I assume that the definitive documentary is yet to be made about all this. Would you like to have a hand in same, and what would such a document be?
Well, I've been making a film related to the celebration at Madison Square Garden just this last week. 10 days ago, I got a call from an English musician by the name of Paul McCartney. He remembered that my brother and I had made a film called What's Happening, The Beatles in the USA.
Sure.
The very first film of their very first visit to America. And when they landed at the airport in New York, which was called Idlewild in those days, we had just rushed out to start filming them. We spent 4 or 5 days with them. And remembering that, and now 37 years later, Paul said, let's do some more filming the way we did it in those days. One of the extraordinary benefits, I would say, both for the people who are filmed and for the filmmakers, is that when you make a documentary film, because it's real life, your life goes on with that film, and the people in the film, somehow or other, the film is important to them. And it's not just a passing fancy. It can be an enormously important act of recognition, attention being paid to the people that you film. And if you do an honest job of it, which we've always tried to do, it's a good experience and a lasting one.
What have you noted about a change, if any? There have been some profound changes in people, in New Yorkers, particularly since you're so vitally and professionally interested in
I sense it most of my
extraordinary, ordinary people.
I sense the change in myself. There's a void somehow, and I don't know. I tend to think of it as metaphysical. There's some very essential thing that's missing in our lives now. And the beautiful thing about that celebration was that it was an attempt to fill that void, I think, with goodwill. More goodwill than has been out in the open, a goodwill that is inherent, I think, in the minds and souls of New Yorkers, and it had a wonderful opportunity to express itself.
What do you think of the television coverage of different parts of it that you've seen? Is the public being kept informed in a responsible way, or is it a nervous press, as The Nation magazine says, being responsible for a nervous public?
Well,
I mean, it's not a yes or a no answer.
I think
it's very complicated.
Just as it is a human and natural response for people to be nervous at whatever news they may get, small or large, I think that the press is responding to the reality of the situation, and it's not encouraging. You it does seem as though, whatever progress is being made in ascertaining how this came into being, this terrible anthrax situation, we're all kept up to date, moment by moment, and that we need to know, and that's a source of some kind of confidence building. But it is a situation that is frightful, and there's no point in hiding it. My problem with the press was that it took so long to begin to get into how people could come around to do these awful things. What were there any errors that were made in our American policies? Now we're beginning to get that sort of information. It's coming to the surface that the Gulf War wasn't a very simple defense of Kuwait. We misbehaved. We killed a lot of Iraqi soldiers unnecessarily, and our record in the Middle East has not been perfect by any means, and
we've supported a lot of terrible dictatorships over the years.
Right, and we're still doing that, and but that information is coming to the surface, and we're learning more about Bin Laden also. So we need to know everything, and I think it's all coming to the surface.
Yes, we do need to know, but sometimes to what end? About 10 days ago, I don't remember exactly, all of the networks and the local stations were publicizing an FBI announcement of a substantial risk or threat of further actions, and I think Attorney General John Ashcroft was there, and my wife and I talked after we had watched that and said, to what end? It just makes people panicky, and what are we supposed to do with that information? How do we act responsibly? What do both of you feel about that? Was that what television journalism should have done?
I have always had a problem with television journalism. I've always felt that the methods that I've been using in making documentaries would improve the quality of journalism. That is, I have this special skill, as most good documentarians have, of being able to connect up with events of the real world with such proximity, so close to people's hearts and minds, so close to people that we can actually film the experience of another person as it's taking place. Too often, so much of what's happening is an interpretation, a reading of the teleprompter by Walter Cronkite or Peter Jennings or whatever. No, I'd rather than them telling me about it, I'd rather be on the scene where what is being described is actually taking place at that time.
Well, the phrase, I think, was a title of a very good documentary, "Walk in My Shoes." And that's what I think we're talking about.
Yeah, it's a beautiful expression, and it just describes very well what I'm talking about. The experience of being in another person's shoes, and we don't get enough of that. I mean, I have, even to this time now, I read so much in the news, you hear so much about Muslims, right? I'd like to know what it is to be a Muslim, and the best way to know that is, from my point of view as a documentary filmmaker, is to see a film or make a film where I share that person's experience. Live with that person and film it. Now, people say, well, okay, how can you film it when the camera's there and people are conscious of the camera, so they're not going to behave? No, we've gotten beyond that. And anyone that knows, as you guys do, the films that my brother and I have made, knows that we've been able to capture very well exactly what's going on in the hearts and minds of somebody. So when you're with that person, you really do feel that you're in the shoes of the other person. It's in psychology, it's called the process of identification, right? You identify with that person. It's a process that we as documentary filmmakers must feel very proud of, very happy with, because a person who would be a stranger to us in a situation that is totally unknown to us. Suddenly, it all becomes familiar to us, and we'll become at one with that other person. It's a commonality of experience, a commonality of interest, and of needs that are satisfied, that bring us together. And the more that we make documentaries this way, of all kinds of situations, including this terrible situation that's going on now, the more we do that, the more we become one with the rest of the world.
Let's reflect for a moment on more peaceful times.
Yes.
One of your pivotal and very impactful films was about the political process, part of it called Primary, segments of which you shot for Robert Drew, another distinguished documentary filmmaker, and it concerned the Democratic Party contest between Kennedy and Humphrey in the latter's home state of Wisconsin. Do you want to talk about that briefly, and what impact you think it had at that time and since, and how it's changed political coverage of it all?
Yeah, it was made in a very new way, in that we went into this thing without any preconceptions, or at least if we had any, we put them aside as best as we could. And one of the odd things was that if you asked Bob Drew and Leacock Pennybaker and myself what we thought of the candidates before filming, we all would have said, well, Humphrey's the better guy. And when the film came out, people said to us, gee, why did you make this film that made Humphrey look so bad? Why were you against Humphrey? Why were you so favored? Why did you favor Kennedy so much? And we smiled because in a way we knew that we had, in an odd way, we had achieved what we wanted. We had achieved the opposite of our prejudices. It was something of a triumph, I think.
To a poem, Stanislas. His name is Stanislas Radziwiłł, and he taught me one sentence: Jeszcze Polska nie zginęła.
At that particular moment, did you find her hands behind her back more expressive than her face?
Of course. Early in the evening, there was a group of the Kennedys and local politicians, and the people passed by to shake their hands. And Jackie told me at that point, she said, my gloves are getting so dirty. So that made me think about her gloves when she got up to speak. But also, I was just a young beginning filmmaker at that time, and an artist friend of mine said, look, it's not just the face that you want to get. Any kind of gesture, wherever it comes from, or whatever is going on in the context of the situation, in addition to the face, or separate from it. So everyone else was filming her talking. That's you got to see the lips, right? And I slipped around and back, and when I saw those hands, maybe a year or so later, when Jackie saw the film for the first time, it was reported back to me that when she saw that scene, she said, you know, I've got to keep this film for my grandchildren. And she's gone, but
If
they
you had
have
been
it.
in charge of the television news coverage of last year's presidential campaign between George Bush and Albert Gore, how would you have done it differently from what we were offered by NBC, CBS, and ABC?
Well, I would have tried my best, and I'm very good at getting access to people. Somehow, I look at them, they look at me, and it's an exchange of confidence and trust. I would try my darndest to be with them behind the scenes, the way we were behind the scenes with Kennedy and Humphrey. I have this attitude when I film people, and I think they sense it right away, that I like to like them very much. I believe in empathizing with the people that I film. I'm that way with or without a camera. But also, if it's somebody that I don't agree with, somebody that I wouldn't like for whatever reason, I owe it to them to try my damnedest to understand them, which is another form of love. I think that's very, very important. Now, there are filmmakers, you know, who are determined to use the subjects as targets and to use the situation and the people to profess a political point of view, for example, of their own. And they may do pretty well at that, but I'm sure there are many times that it's not really fair.
Up until the election, did you feel that American television had given the voters in November of last year adequate preparation to make an intelligent vote between Bush and Gore?
I don't think so. No.
What was lacking?
Well, there should have been more of this capturing on film or tape, in the intelligence of the voters, exactly how they were thinking, and a debate not only between the leaders, but in effect a debate amongst average citizens. We certainly do not have in television the respect that the public deserves in hearing their voice, in representing how they think and feel, and as if they don't deserve it, as if only the celebrities and the politicians should be given access to the cameras. I don't think that's right. It's not making full use of us as a democracy and the technology that we have that can make for a connectedness amongst us.
There was a phase in your film career when you made a number of films about celebrities, which included Marlon Brando, Truman Capote, the Rolling Stones, and the film producer Joseph Levine. But one of the most remarkable films in all your distinguished career was a film that had nothing to do with celebrities, called Salesman. And I wonder how you came upon that idea. And we're going to see a clip of Salesman in a minute. But give us some background on how you started to get interested in that project.
Oh, yeah. My brother and I went out on our own in 1962, and
You left Drew?
yes, because we felt that we would be at our best, as any artist is, coming forth with ideas that are our own and then pursuing them in our own special way. Mm-hmm. We had with Drew and Associates made an enormous contribution to documentary filmmaking in primary, right? We invented the kind of equipment so that we could go around in a very easily flexible, portable way, so that the equipment and our manner of making films wouldn't interfere with what was going on. That was impossible before that time. But we wanted to carry the documentary genre a step further from, let's say, a documentary, a feature-length documentary, for example. I mean, a documentary could be an hour and a half long, but still not be a feature. And with that kind of ambition in mind, we looked for subject matter. We had made a film in 1968, 66, I guess it was, of Truman Capote,
Yes.
who had just written his book In Cold Blood. And that was an invention of sorts, in that he claimed, and probably properly so, that he had invented the nonfiction novel. Okay. Well, we wanted to invent the nonfiction feature film. Okay, a carryover from literature to filmmaking. But what would the subject be? What would lend itself to that kind of a big step forward? Is there enough drama in life that you could make a dramatic film?
Another dramatic question would have been, where is the funding coming from?
Well, that's another question. We had to do that, make that film on our own, right, on our own financing. Well, my brother had lunch one day with Joe Fox, who was Truman Capote's editor at Random House, and he posed the question to Joe: how are we going to do this? What's a good subject? Joe said, "What about door-to-door salesman?" My brother and I had sold, my brother Avon, I had sold encyclopedias and full of brushes in high school in order to earn enough money so we can get to college, right? And so we knew that it was full of possibilities. A guy knocks on the door, who's going to be on the other side, right? Is he going to be successful? And it smacked of everything American, the rugged individualist. This guy is totally on his own, right? And so that was great, okay. But in our research, we still hadn't found, weren't quite convinced. I mean, selling full of brushes or selling Tupperware, or, but then we discovered that there were 4,000 guys selling the Bible. And the Bible, the selling, and we had something that might be a film that would tell us perhaps even more about America than any
Were you
film out
influenced
there.
in this analysis in any way by the power of Arthur Miller's great play, Death of a Salesman? Did that affect your decision to move forward at all?
Not really, although one can see many parallels to that. We didn't know, for example, that the main character would turn out to be another Willy Loman. We weren't looking for that, but that's what did happen. And not only that, even more importantly, the main character turned out to be somebody very much like my father.
The best seller in the world is the Bible, for one reason. It's the greatest piece of literature of all time. It's really tremendous, isn't it?
The shepherd's son, 3 kings, flight into Egypt, the childhood of Jesus, Mary turns snare, Mary finds Jesus in the temple. So you can see how this would be an inspiration in the home. You like that, honey? What's in there?
Christine.
Well, she's as bright, she's pretty like a mother, huh? Christine, you know what my name is? Yes. Paul. Paul, you know? Paul?
You have a cousin named Paul, don't you,
Yeah.
Chris?
You can see how complete it is.
The Bible runs as little as $49.95, and we have 3 plans on it. Cash, COD, and also they have a little Catholic honor plan.
Which plan would be the best for you? The A, B, or C?
I'm really not interested in once
Yeah.
I speak, it'll what my husband
Yeah. You wouldn't want to give him a surprise. Does he have a birthday coming up? Your lovely gift.
That's true.
We place a tremendous... The Bible is still the best seller in the world, so...
I just couldn't afford it now. We've been swamped with medical bills.
What was the reaction of the salesman and the company to the finished product?
Well, the sales manager, being a super salesman, said, well, you filmed 4 salesmen, right? And only one of them wasn't a good salesman. So it was a winning situation for him. The other 3 salesmen, other than Paul, I saw them watching the film for the first time, and I couldn't detect much of a reaction from them. But Paul reacted to every moment of it. There were times when I could see tears, and other times when he was laughing. He really got it. And of course, he was the one who was the most sensitive, as kind of a poet of sorts. And we didn't know to begin with that he would turn out to be the main character in the film, but inevitably it had to be him. Too many documentary films, to my mind, are so much unlike the best of literature. In the best of literature or in art, for example, you go to a museum and you see great art. Is it about issues? And when it is about an issue, then something's wrong. It's not as good as the Rembrandt portrait next to it. And a Rembrandt portrait is not about an issue. It's something probably not describable, except you know that it's art. And
the best issues are enduring and universal.
Yes. But what I'm trying to say is that another way to put it is great art doesn't have a purpose. Now there's some very good art that has a message. You know, there's message art, I'm sure, right?
The painting may have a purpose to ennoble the viewer in some way.
Yes, ennoble, yes, but not a. Maybe you could help me this way. Not a specific issue is being addressed, and yet it's communicating something truly artful and very important. So. More important than all that, I think, is that when we made the film, we weren't trying to address any particular issue, right? But, I mean, it is so full of, Salesman is so full of what to think about. For example, even beyond our own comprehension or plan, as it may have developed in the structure of the film. I remember showing the film after we finished it, showing it to a high school class, and the 2 or 3 women that were in the class, one of them got up and said, this has moved me so much, this film. It's the first time I've ever seen what it is to be a woman, a housewife. Hadn't thought about that. And in fact, it's not even reflected in the title, Salesman. A title more reflective of that would be The Salesman and the Women.
That's marvelous praise.
Yeah.
And here's a comment from UCLA Professor Marina Goldovskaya.
Yeah.
Quote, the Maysles brothers find ordinary things, ordinary characters, and disclose them, reveal them, and show how unique a human life is, how fragile it is. They do in documentaries what only big writers can achieve in literature, such as Hemingway.
Wow, that's something, isn't it?
Your next film was Gimme Shelter,
Right.
covering the Rolling Stone tour. How did you decide to do that? Because it turned out to be one of the epical films of the time. But,
Well, we got a call one day from Haskell Wexler, a very
great cinematographer.
great cinematographer and movie maker. And the Stones were already on their tour, and they were in California at that point, early on in their tour. And he had spoken with them, I suppose, with the notion maybe of making a film himself. But that didn't work out if he tried to do that. And so he called us up and said, look, the Stones are going to be in New York at the Plaza Hotel tomorrow. If you want to make a film of them, and you might well want to do so, there they are. Maybe you could make contact with them. So, employing our best methods of access, we simply went to the hotel and rung them up and met with them. But we truly didn't know how good.
There was no other entree. You
That's
simply
it.
called them cold.
That's it.
Haskell had not called them ahead of time. Said,
No.
"Seeing these guys,
No.
see these guys."
No. So, and we didn't really know how good their music was. So in chatting with them, we discovered that they were performing a concert in Baltimore the next evening. And so we went to the concert, and we thought, yeah, these guys are good. But there was one more element that was equally important to us, and that was that we weren't interested in filming just a concert film, or concerts, right? We were looking for something more than that, whatever that might be. And
Did you have a clue what that might be?
No.
In that early
it's
time?
just that these guys interested us, and I can't really put my finger on it. We just had this hunch that in some serendipitous fashion, we would discover there was more to it than just a concert.
When did you become aware that during the filming or during the concert, the Hells Angels, the kind of bodyguards for the Rolling Stones, had been bashing someone who was actually killed, that really the concert had turned violent?
The death occurred without my knowing it. I was on the stage with the Stones, getting all this interesting stuff with them and looking into the crowd. But the killing took place just a bit to the left of my view, hidden by part of the stage, so I couldn't see it. My brother, fortunately, was on a scaffolding above with another camera person, and they got it. So I didn't discover it until quite some time later.
Was there any police intervention? I didn't see it.
Well, you see, this is one of the interesting aspects of it. People who are against the drug war and would like to legalize drugs would tell you that that violence probably wouldn't have taken place because there would have been a legitimate police force there. A legitimate police force, had there been one, there wouldn't have been the event because everybody was on dope of one sort or another, and they would have been hauled off to jail or whatever.
David actually shot that from the scaffold camera?
Not a fellow, Baird Bryant was the actual cameraman, but the two of them witnessed it. We had this idea when we were editing the film that as the trial was taking place, no one had asked us for any of that material. You would have thought so because it was generally known that we had caught the killing on film. And so we thought, well, it might be interesting if we called the sheriff's office in San Francisco and said, look, we have this footage of the killing. We'd like to show it to you, but we'd also like to film you looking at it, right? And then we called the Hells Angels and said, we'd like to come up to San Francisco. We'd like to show you this stuff, and can we film you? They agreed. So we went out and the sheriff's office, they were quite cooperative, and we got this very interesting footage of us showing it to them. We had another camera person come in filming us in the scene because now we were part of it. And the Hells Angels said, no, we'll take a look at it, but we're not going to allow you to film us. And they didn't, right? And at the same time, they said, look, we're I think they call themselves live performers or something like that, and they should get paid $1 million, which we never serviced them.
In terms of intervention, the responsibility of this has always been asked, I'm sure, both of us. But let's stay with Gimme Shelter for a moment.
I know your question. I'm going to ask
Right.
it, okay?
It's a question that's always asked with whatever we're filming.
How is it you filmed it without putting your camera down and trying to stop it? That wasn't an option because my brother and I my brother and his camera person were up in the scaffolding. They couldn't have come down in time to have done anything, nor did they know until that very moment as they were filming that there was a killing to take place.
You had Mick Jagger watching the dailies there. And what was his response, reaction?
Well, as you watch the film, you see him taking it very seriously, and at one moment you hear him say, "That's so horrible." So some people have seen the film and have said, "Oh well, Mick, you know, he didn't take it that seriously. You know, he was kind of cold guy." That's not true. If you look at the film and watch it carefully, you'll see that he was very deeply moved. I mean, enough so that might well have been why it was so difficult for him to give a release. When he saw that film, he just couldn't pull himself together to sign a release. And we having spent well over $500,000 in making the film, and being so pleased with having made it as well as we did, we were stuck without a release for 6 months. And my brother, at that point, met a very close friend of Mick's, Donald Camel, who saw the film and said, "Don't worry, it's too good a thing to go by. I'll talk to Mick."
What
And
happened
we
when
got
you
the
took
release.
the finished film to the television networks, trying to get them to buy and show it?
There's no way then, and I've never had any success really in getting the film shown on commercial television. I remember we showed it to CBS, and they said, "No, there's too much violence." A network that shows, what, 10, 20 million killings a year? Somehow, for us, the fact that it was a real one, you know, made it imperative that it be depicted for what it was, you know. And without seeing that film, many people in journalism itself reported erroneously how the killing had taken place. They said that it was during the performance of "Sympathy for the Devil" that the killing took place. It wasn't that. It was another song of theirs, "Under My Thumb."
One of your major accomplishments was a movie called Grey Gardens, celebrated then and now, and it featured the reclusive aunt and the first cousin of Jackie Onassis in their rather dilapidated home in East Hampton, and it's continuing to be shown all the time in different venues. Tell us about the background of that project.
Oh, well, we discovered these two women through Lee Radziwill. And they were the aunt and cousin of Lee. She wanted to do something autobiographical, and in discussing that with Peter Beard, her friend at that time, Peter said, "Well, if you're going to do a documentary, you should meet the Maysles." So she called us up, and I remember on the phone she said that she had some 40 or so items that could be the subject matter for a film about her childhood. Come on over, let's discuss it. And she was going to pay for the film as well. And
She had said this?
What's that?
Who is
no,
it?
this is Lee Radziwill.
Lee, right.
And so Lee said that, so I looked at the list and I saw, among other things, item number 34 was her eccentric aunt and cousin. But we began making the film, and 4 or 5 or 6 days into it, she was on a call with Edie. They were running into problems with the Board of Health, and so she said, "I've got to go over that to help them out. Do you want to come along?" So we went along with her, and she said, "Do you think you should bring the camera?" And we said, "Yeah, sure." And we started filming upon meeting her, right? And some days later, Lee said, let's take a look at what we've got so far. And that material, I think, was so powerful that I think she felt somewhat upstaged and lost interest in the project. But we just couldn't put the project down. We found ourselves so fascinated with the strangeness of their existence. And
when did Edith and Edie Beale see the material? Did they
were
see
the
it
first.
early on?
They were the first ones to see the film. We brought the film to Grey Gardens, projected it for them, and I remember there was some delay in response as Edie, the daughter, walked back and forth. Then she turned to us, and in a very loud voice, she shouted, the Maysles have created a classic.
Well, we're going to take a glimpse of that classic right now, as a matter of fact.
They all want luncheon. Come on, we're going to have luncheon. What? What? I fed the cats. I just have to leave the New York City and lead my own life. I don't see any other future. You shut up with the goddamn beautiful day. Shut up.
Paris is a place for you. Get on the stage in Paris at the Folie
No, but the
Bergère.
point is that I came down here to take care of my mother. I was sick and tired of worrying about her night and day.
Well, I had a very
I was
good
away from her for
I had a
5 or
very
6
good
years,
man.
and I was sick
I had a
and
very
tired
good
of
man to
lying
take
awake
care
at
of me.
night,
You know, he took care of me
wondering what
for
was happening to my
25
mother.
years. She didn't have to worry.
Who was the man that took care of you for 25 years?
23
Nobody
years.
took care of her for 25 years. I took care of this damn house for 25 years.
I think Al was...
Dare say my mother was ever taken care of by any man but my father, and I'll push you under the goddamn bed.
No, Edie, I think Al was referring to Gould.
Yes, he was.
He took care of mother by accompanying her to the movies and playing the piano.
Took care of me and the washing. The front
No one
there.
took care of Mrs. Beale. She had my father's money and her own money, the Bouvier money.
Often one feels that when you capture a moment with such vividness, that it's sometimes exploitative and intrusive. How do you draw that important line?
Actually, I'm somewhat embarrassed by that scene. It's the only scene and the only time with them when I was filming where I might have said something that might provoke them. We were always watching and listening, and rather than even conversing with them. In our silence, we maintained a very good rapport with them, which is all we really wanted. So this was kind of an era, I think, in our filmmaking, this moment.
Tell us about your next project, which sounds fascinating, The Liliest Kin, about the legacy of cotton.
Oh yeah, well that's already finished. Susan Fromke and I, at the request of the HBO, made a film about poverty in the South, and we found a woman, most remarkable black woman, 60 years old, comes from a family of 23 children, 12 children of her own, 35 grandchildren, 15 great-grandchildren. Nobody has a job, and nobody's educated. She herself is illiterate. And, but a most remarkable person who really takes on all the responsibilities for everybody. The guys, married or not, have left, and you don't see any evidence of really any men around. And so some of these problems are, rather typical, and but a saving device, I think, is her character and the character of the people. But also, there's a man who was a supervisor of the schools, and he gives us some insight into how all this came about, the heritage of slavery, and so forth.
HBO has had a very distinguished record in recent years dealing with documentary films, some of it, I think, due to my longtime friend Sheila Nevins, and surely some of the work done by public television. But what about the rest of the television landscape? I mean, the hour-long documentary on network television has ceased to be. Are you optimistic about the future of documentary film and television?
The hour-long documentary on commercial television has gone in a way, good riddance in a way, in that it never had really fulfilled its promise as I see it. It was always a narrated kind of...
the traditional
yeah.
linear documentary.
Right. It didn't...
Was that changed in a meaningful way by the work of your friend Fred Wiseman?
Somewhat, although my complaint with so many of his films was that they were point-of-view films, that very frequently was a good guy, bad guy sort of thing. And I was very offended by the first one of his films called Titicut Follies, in which he tried to, with the best of intentions, the intentions of a lawyer perhaps, you know, he advocated improvement in the mental health institution and showed how bad the administration was.
In Massachusetts.
Right. But in that process, he represented the inmates of the institution in a way that was, I felt, very inhuman, just showing them at their worst in their psychotic states without...
I thought that was exploitative.
Yes, I thought so. I thought that, and in fact, I understand that I heard recently that there was a move in that hospital to make changes at the time when he was filming, and he didn't represent that in the film. It's this attitude of I'm going to get the administration. In high school, I'm going to get the administration. My motivation is always to like the people that I'm filming, and if I can't like them, at least I'll make every attempt to understand them. Virginia Woolf made the comment in one of her essays in 1926, what would cinema be like if left to its own devices? And what I see as the most powerful element in documentary filming, and what is so unique about it, is that it can capture another person's experience. So why not make use of that uniqueness? You know, a sculptor shouldn't try to paint unless he feels that he wants to make that departure. But let's make use of what is so unique and so powerful.
We're talking now in the end of October, about 6 weeks after the monstrous attack on September 11th.
Yeah.
And since then, there's been a spate of discussions and articles about the new agenda in Hollywood. They're going to allegedly go easy on their standard shoot-'em-up action, violent films, and they're looking for more romantic subjects and so on. And film big-budget films with Arnold Schwarzenegger, with the standard violent chop suey films, have actually been, at least for the time being, the release has been canceled. Do you think there will be any? Is it likely that they will stick with a meaningful change? Will the product from Hollywood in the next couple of years be meaningfully different from what it is? Because so much of that work is the antithesis of your own work.
Well, part of the presupposition, which is common also to commercial filmmaking, is that the aesthetic is such that it's based on the idea, let's make it expensive. And the more expensive we can make it, the better the product, the more we can sell it, the more uniqueness that we'll have. Let's give it an edge, right? All of these things are surface, silly things to
Even
me.
Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah, it's making the public dumb and dumber. I think the aesthetic in documentary is not to make it expensive. In fact, it's getting less and less expensive. Now that we're using these little video cameras, it costs $10 to throw in an hour of tape.
That's a big breakthrough.
Oh, enormous breakthrough, enormous, right? And we're just getting further and further away from Hollywood and closer and closer to real life.
Is the use of digital technology, is that going to be a significant factor as you see it in the years ahead?
Oh, it's already revolutionizing filmmaking for us as documentary filmmakers.
Because you can get it cheaper with better quality? I mean, what is the
quality?
reason for that?
The quality is not any better. In fact, just as 16 is not as good as 35 millimeter, the little video camera is not as good as 16 millimeter. But if you're romancing a young woman and you take her to a great restaurant, you're not going to be worried about the lighting, the way a Hollywood cinematographer would like to spend hours and thousands of dollars in getting the lighting just right. It's a whole different way of looking at life and looking at how to make a film.
Al Wasserman,
Yes.
another distinguished documentarian whom you know, once said to us during an interview for this series, the documentary is a house with many rooms. We asked him, as we ask you, when it comes to television with its so-called reality shows, with its somewhat shallow news magazines, are those rooms in need of extensive renovation?
Yes, I would think so. I would think so.
And can they be renovated? Is there hope that they'll be renovated and rebuilt with the
I'll give you
the golden age of white papers and ABC News close-ups and
give you an
more
example of some house cleaning
Mr. Maysles.
from my own experience. I take the number 10 bus in New York City every morning to my studio. It's only a 10-minute ride, but there are a number of times where I see something that I should be recording with a video camera. One such occasion, I'm sitting up front of the bus, and there's an older man talking to a woman whom we probably just met a couple of stops back. He's having a very serious conversation with her. But as he's talking to her, he keeps looking back at me, so that our gaze is getting more and more intense. And he's talking about how he was in the war and how it's always young kids that he had killed, and he lost a lot of his buddies. And then he said, you know, here it is, it's 9 o'clock, I get up at 8:30 every morning, and again, looking back at me very intensely, he says, I'm 86 years old, and I'm totally blind. Now, if I had that on film, or on video, right, and I would take it, let's say, to Mike Wells, whom I happen to know, right, he's a fellow Brookline guy as well, right, he would see it, and I'm sure that what he would say is, you know, Al, it's not exactly entertainment, and it's not news. I guess you'd call it some kind of poetry. I don't know. We don't do poetry.
What do you think of the 60 Minutes is deservedly far different and far better than virtually all of the other news magazine shows?
Yeah.
Is the best of those segments they do, whether it's Mike Wallace or Morley Safer or the others, is it a new form of documentary, or is it a different beast altogether?
To me, it just isn't making best use of the medium. There must be such a hunger, such a need, certainly, that we know one another directly as Americans, as world citizens. I've yet to see a piece of a film of what it is to be in Russia as an average Russian person, or to be a Muslim, or to be a Jew. And all this is very important in our understanding of what life really is, rather than picking it up from somebody who wasn't there.
Part of the ingredients, though, of any documentary clearly is a great story. Sometimes the story evolves. You have no idea of what you're seeking to get. Right. Sometimes you do.
Right.
And
but see, I would say that just as in literature, there are different forms that are quite legitimate. There's a novel, there are short stories, there's poetry. I want to make a film, and I've wanted to make this almost from the beginning of my career. I've done pieces of it. I want to get back to it as soon as possible, as soon as I get some funding for it. I love traveling on trains, and I see the train as a metaphor for life as it goes from station to station. When I get on a train, just as on a bus in New York, I go through that train and I'll find somebody, especially on a long distance train, where there's something going on in that person's life. I want to record that. involvement. And so it means getting off the train with that person. And if that person is on that train to find her mother, and I filmed such a scene, knowing that her mother was waiting for her at the next station, right? I would get that encounter, and I filmed it, right? So the film will be a number of short stories, unified by the metaphor of the train.
Excellent. Your work reminds me of the question posed to Frank Lloyd Wright. Of all your projects, Mr. Wright, what's your favorite?
Oh.
And he is to have replied, my next one.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely?
And I assume you'd
That's
have
it.
the same answer.
That's it, yeah.
Well, to use your metaphor of the train, your life too has been a great adventure, and we thank you, Al, for your enduring contributions to the documentary. Long may it and you flourish and prosper, and we're very grateful for your time that you spent with us this morning. Thank you very much.
Happy to spread the word.
It was grand.